I'm not going to be downhearted by it.
Do you blame it on the style of the campaign, perhaps?
I don't blame it on anything. I blame it on the voters' choice. They're entitled to their choice, and we can't complain about it.
Would you agree with Mr. Goldford of the Labour Party, who said that really the essence of it is that it's Labour who's moved forward rather than you or the Conservatives?
Well, if I were in the Labour Party, I think I'd be a bit disappointed. They had undoubtedly a much more professional campaign than they had last time, and yet they still haven't been able to dent Mrs. Thatcher, and neither have we. And I think the big issue in the coming few years is going to be how can we build something that will defeat the Conservatives. We haven't got it yet.
How about the Richard Home result?
Well, I'm naturally very disappointed at Richard's result in Cheltenham, especially as that last poll was putting him ahead. Perhaps we shouldn't put so much faith in polls.
Are you depressed as you go?
I'm not in the least depressed. I'm looking forward to my count, which I must go now. Otherwise,
Mr. Steele, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
David Steele and Judy Steele with Richard Lindley there, with the horseshoe on the door behind, as David Steele goes off to his count. Now, we've now had 12 results in. Let's hear the latest forecast on the basis of that, Peter.
Right, David, let's build up the forecast on the map. Here we go. The Conservatives, 351, 42. Look at them pile up there. 42 down on what they were before. The Labour Party, 249, up 40. The Alliance, 26, down 1. And the others, 24 plus 3. Let's just split the Alliance in two and see what we're forecasting currently the Liberals and the SDP will take. 18 seats, the Liberals, we say, down 1. The SDP continuing with the 8 they had in the old Parliament. The others, 24, up 3. We're forecasting the Scottish National Party wins in Scotland. Now, take a spin inside the new chamber of the House of Commons, and let's see what it looks like. There we are, inside the Commons chamber. There's Mrs. Thatcher on the government benches, through the winning post with 351. The Labour Party, Mr. Kinnock, on 249. Add all the opposition together, subtract them from the Conservatives, and you get a forecast Conservative majority now, David, of 52.
52, right. Well, on that note, let's go and talk to the chairman of the Conservative Party, the man who planned this campaign for the Conservatives, Norman Tebbit, who's with Nick Clark at Chingford.
Mr. Tebbit, your reaction to that figure of 52 that we're projecting at the moment?
I think it's a little early in the evening to come to a figure like that. Let's wait and see a little longer, but if that's how it works out, that'll be pretty satisfactory. A comfortable majority to take us through a full Parliament.
I'm told that privately you felt that maybe this wasn't the best campaign the Tories had ever run. Would you accept that?
No, I don't know who told you that, and if they were my private views, I would keep them to myself by definition.
What about the idea that is being expressed tonight that Labour cannot win an election? Does this result if it is as we predict?
Well, if, as you hint, and one or two journalists have hinted, they ran by far the best campaign, and I don't necessarily accept that, but we win, it would suggest that they must have a lousy product.
What are the policies particularly, do you think, that have attracted people to the Conservatives once again, apparently?
The strength of the economy, our openness about our proposals in contrast to the deceit of the Labour Party, and the way in which the Labour Party was caught out time and time again trying to conceal its policies, and eventually, of course, the incidents of one particular Labour shadow minister becoming very abusive when he was caught out.
You think that incident, you're referring to that with Mr. Healy, are you? That Mr. Healy's incident on TVAM may have had a real effect on the poll?
Well, I think it just sharpened the point that we were making, that there is a great element of deceit and hypocrisy in the Labour Party. It underlined it.
What about the position of Mrs. Thatcher? What would you say was her contribution to this success, bearing in mind how much has been made of her position as leader and as the person for whom people vote or don't?
Well, I think she and I and our colleagues and all the Conservative Party workers in the country made it between us. And I think that's the right way to look at it. A team effort. She led it, and the rest of us backed her up. And the voters so far on these indications seem to have given her a vote of approval.
And the idea of on and on does not seem to have upset too many of them.
I suspect it may have upset Dennis Thatcher, but I'm not sure that it upset too many other people. And I think in any case that was a slightly tongue-in-cheek remark, you know, rather like mine that I could see her going on to the end of the century. I don't think anybody thought that I was being terribly serious about it. It was slightly tongue-in-cheek.
Mr. Tebbit, thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's now just after midnight, 12:05. Let's just, for any of you who may just have come in and joined us, see how things stand in this election 1987 at 5 minutes past midnight. The BBC is predicting or forecasting a Conservative majority of 52, and Mrs. Thatcher has said she is cautiously optimistic. After 15 results in, this is how the new House actually looks at the moment, if they were all to go down there to Westminster, there'd be 9 Conservatives, 6 Labour up 1, and 1 other has fallen by the wayside. And this is our forecast in full. 351 Conservatives in the new House, down 42 on dissolution, 249 Labour, up 40. The Alliance on 26, down 1. Others on 24, up 3. Cecil Parkinson, the former chairman of the Conservative Party, speaking on this programme, said the slickness of the Labour campaign had a very good effect for us. And Dennis Healey, for Labour, has said Labour is far from dead and the Tories are not walking it. And John Cartwright, for the SDP, has commented, just see it, we're banging our head against the ceiling and not really breaking through. That's the gloomiest remark from the Alliance that we've had so far tonight. The 2 leaders are being rather more optimistic and cheerful than that. We've had a result, an interesting one in from the Western Isles. Let's just have a look at that. The Western Isles, which was held by the Scottish Nationalists, has been taken by Labour in this Gaelic-speaking area, and it's a majority of 2,300 as opposed to a majority of 3,700, which the SNP had. And we have at Dundee East, Gordon Wilson, I think. Hold on, we have Gordon Wilson, the leader of the SNP, is with our cameras up in Scotland. Let's get his reaction to losing the Western Isles. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Good. What's your reaction to this first loss you've had in Western Isles?
Well, it's one of grievous disappointment. The seat was held by my colleague Donald Stewart for close on 17 years, and it's a great pity, I think, that we've lost that one, but there's no doubt that the Alliance vote came up very sharply there, and we probably lost it on that basis. But credit must also go to the Labour Party, who have succeeded in building up their own vote very substantially in this first election from Scotland.
But you've lost a quarter of your vote there, haven't you? You've gone down 25%. Do you treat Western Isles as a particular case, different from the rest of Scotland, Gaelic-speaking area and all that? Or do you think the same thing may begin to happen to you in the rest of Scotland tonight?
Well, it's a very distinctive seat in many ways. It's not immune, of course, from national influences. And I think there is some evidence that there is a fairly substantial flow of support to the Labour Party in Scotland, which must be reflected there. But it is a very distinctive seat, and I do not think you can draw any conclusions about other areas in which we are likely to win in this general election.
How do you think you're going to do in Dundee East?
Well, I've been asked that before. There is a declaration of secrecy. I think it's going to be fairly tight, but we've got just to an early stage in the count, and I'm long enough in the tooth to wait and see. And I certainly hope to be back in the Commons again, but the electors of Dundee East will decide that once the counters have assessed what their judgment is.
Just one last thing. If Labour do have a very good result tonight in Scotland, if the Tories are defeated on the scale that some people think they will that in the long run help the Scottish Nationalists? Will it make people think that Scotland ought to go its own way? Well,
it could very well do that. Of course, I think it would be more important that the Scottish National Party had substantial representation and substantial votes in this general election to provide a spine or backbone to the Scottish Labour MPs who, in the last Parliament at any rate, were not very active in defending Scottish interests. But Scotland is moving in a divergent track from the rest of the United Kingdom, according to the results.
I have to stop you there. We'll watch out for your result. Thank you very much for joining us from Dundee. We go down to Yeovil for the declaration there. Paddy Ashdown, the Liberal home.
Ashdown, Liberal, SDP Alliance, 28,841. John Francis Fitzmaurice, Labour, 4,099. George Dougal Sandyman, Conservative, 23,141.
So no trouble at all for Paddy Ashdown there. His majority goes up from 3,500 in Yeovil in Somerset to 5,700. A man who some think might one day lead the Liberal Party if David Steele someday decides to stand down. A good result for him. Let's just see the share and change in Yeovil in Somerset. He was, of course, deeply embroiled in the whole business of the Westland helicopter affair down there, a staunch defender of Westland helicopters. There's the share of the vote. Let's just see the change of the vote. Liberal vote goes up 1%, Conservatives go down 3%, and Labour up 2%. Now, what does that tell us about the alliance in the rest of the West Country. Well, it's a good result for him. Very personal, I suspect, quite a personal vote.
I'm sure that's right, but it is worth noticing that the Labour vote went up a little bit in Yeovil, but it's not going up as much as it's going up nationally in seats where Labour finished third last time. The Labour vote in that sense is being squeezed, and in that part of the world to the Alliance's advantage.
Anything to say about Scotland, the result we had from Western Isles, and the comments that the SNP made?
I don't think I'd want to draw any general inferences from the result from the
You
Western
sound
Isles.
very professorial. I don't think I'd want to draw any inference from the result. John Cole, do you want to draw any inference?
Well, not from the Western Isles alone, but I think the one clear prediction on a night when predictions aren't doing too well is that there's a very heavy regional difference in different parts of the country. I would like to predict that at the end of the night we're going to have a very much more divided political map between the hard Conservative areas and the hard Labour areas, with the alliance picking up around the fringes. I think that is the pattern. It's going to be a more divided kingdom politically than it was before.
You're talking about a divided kingdom. We've got an example of it from Sunderland South. I don't know if we can see that result, but it's just come through. It's a very interesting one. Labour have held on to it. Chris Mullin, who's the new candidate there, has taken it. The majority was 5,000, and the majority now is 21,000. In Sunderland South, in Tyne and Wear. The Labour vote has gone up 28%. The Conservative vote has dropped 30%, and we have the first lost deposit of the night. The Conservatives have lost their deposit in Sunderland South with a massive fall of 30%.
Do you think those figures are right?
Well,
David?
I ask myself that as I say them.
Yes, indeed. I mean, if they are right, it does illustrate the point I was just making, which was that it seems that in the north, the Wrexham seat springs to mind, Stan Orme's seat, various seats that are coming in, and above all this one now, it does look as if Labour is doing very well in its own areas. Whether that will mean they'll pick up any seats in those areas is another matter.
It's a swing of 29% from Conservative to Labour compared with the last election. And it's an area, of course, of very, very high unemployment and great decay, urban decay, and all those things, actually.
First northeastern seat we've had, isn't it? Yes, it'd be very interesting to see what happens.
Fourth we've had.
From the northeast.
We have to check this result. I'm told that there is a possibility it may be wrong. But let's stick by it for the moment. Let's go to Robin Day while we sort things out here.
Alan B., what do you think of that Yeovil result? Does it make up for the disappointment of Cheltenham?
It's a very good result for Paddy Ashton, and a very good result for all of us. I think it does show, as John Cole was saying, that in different parts of the country you're going to get some quite surprisingly different results. But also generally our vote has held up well, except in those constituencies where we're in third place and being squeezed.
Is Paddy Ashton a future leader of the Liberal Party?
Well, I hope the question doesn't arise, because David Steele's the leader of the Liberal Party, and I think likely to remain so.
Not forever.
No.
Not go on and on and on.
But I don't think we'll...
if I may coin a phrase.
Indeed, but I don't think we'll have leadership campaigns going at this stage in the game.
No, but I mean, we have this sort of conversation at this time of night. There's David Blunkett up in Sheffield. Hello, David.
Good evening.
What do you think of this prediction of a 52 majority for Margaret Thatcher?
Well, what do you think I think of it, Robin? I think it's a fairly unfortunate and in many ways disappointing result for the Labour Party. Not unforeseen 4 weeks ago, but we've had such a very good campaign, and Neil Kinnock has projected the values and the morality of the Labour Party so well that I think many of us hoped that things would be better than they are tonight.
Let me just ask you this. Norman Tebbit made a comment just now. He says, if the Labour Party campaign was so skillful, was so well presented, as everybody seems to say it was, he said they must have had a pretty lousy product to present.
Well, I think Norman's remarks were quite offensive, to be honest. Incidentally, my black eye isn't because I've had a clash with him, it's because a door hit me when I didn't have the dog with me. I think that the truth of the matter is that there's not only a divide geographically, but there's a tremendous gap in terms of people's perceptions of what's happening within this country. And that's reflected in the results that we've seen so far. I imagine it will be reflected further on in the evening when we see more of the results coming in. I think people in the south are finding it very difficult to perceive of those of us who live and work and have our community in the north and in Scotland and in Wales as anything but a kind of relic of a past empire. And I think that's very unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the country in the next 4 or 5 years, because Margaret Thatcher has no sympathy or empathy with what's happening to us in the north, and in many ways is likely to exaggerate that.
Let me just ask Peter Bottomley here, who's Minister for Roads. He might have a comment on your comment that Margaret Thatcher doesn't have any sympathy or empathy for people who live in the north.
I think it's absolute nonsense. And the reason she's as tough as she is It's because she cares passionately. And if you can start delivering the opportunity for jobs to be created in the north, if you can start tackling some of the inner London estates, take a South London constituency where 93% of homes are owned by the council. Anyone with any pushes off. They don't want to live in a council house if they can avoid it. They don't want to have to send their children to a school that isn't satisfying them. And our policies are designed just as much in Sheffield as in South London to liberate people who haven't got much opportunity.
Well,
David Blunkett?
I think that is an example of the lack of conception as to what is happening. The increase in prices in property of 20% in London, which creates no wealth but makes some money for some people, actually doesn't address the problems of craftsmen in Sheffield, people with real skills who are unable to use those skills to create a decent society for themselves, their families, and the community at all. And I'm afraid that that sort of remark about the way in which our people are living in our areas, who can't make money out of money, they want to make a living for themselves out of hard work, out of skill. That really does show what sort of world we're going to be living in the next 5 years.
Thank you, David. We'll hear from you again. I have to go back to David Dibbleby now for some more information on the election.
The bit of information about Sunderland South. There was indeed, as John Cole spotted, a mistake in the result, but it wasn't our mistake, it was the returning officer, who apparently gave the wrong figures. So here is a revision of Chris Mullen's hold over Sunderland South. His majority 12,600. It's still double what the last Labour majority was, which was 5,500. His share of the vote up 8%, not the 28% we said. The Conservative vote down 4%, and the Alliance vote down 5%. So that's how that went. So that was, for once, a mistake by a returning officer and not by us. We haven't made many, actually, tonight so far. Peter, let's have a look at the regions now.
David, yes, let's just look at the beginnings of a contrast now. Let's take a spin around outside the House of Parliament and look into the regions at what is happening in the northeast first. There goes the northeast popping out at us. That's the North Sea stuck out on the right there, if you can recognise it roughly, the shape of it. And here we have the results in 5 in so far. Labour on 5, the Tories on none, the Alliance on none. There's the Sunderland South little blip of red up at the top there, and you can see the result from Hull there too. All Labour so far, but what matters, of course, is the share and change in the vote. Now, the share of the vote so far is Labour on 59%, the Conservatives on 25%, Labour well ahead in the results so far that we've had in, and the Alliance on 16. The change that represents, this is the real picture that matters, in the North East, you have Labour up 8%, and the Conservatives down 3%. That's a swing from the Conservatives to Labour up there of 5.5%. That's the kind of swing Labour needs all over the country to get a hung parliament. Nowhere near that in the South, because just look at the comparison between North East and South East. Here are the Tories in the South East way ahead, with the Alliance 27% in second place, the Labour Party in third place, and here is the change. Again, compare that change in the North East with the South East. Here you've got the Tories up 1%, the Alliance down 2%, and Labour just up 2%. So look at that extraordinary regional contrast in admittedly just a very few first results.
Interesting that there's a recount on in Wolverhampton North East. It's a seat that Labour is in danger of losing to the Conservatives. Let's say that the Conservatives have 4th on their hit list to take from Labour. It used to belong to Renia Short, but she was the MP. I shouldn't say belong. It used to be her seat in the House of Commons, and there's a recount there in the North East. Let's, in the meantime, while we wait to hear a bit more about what's going on there, join Kenneth Clark, who's with Julian O'Halloran, up at his seat. Kenneth Clark is one of the rising stars, if that's the right word, of the Conservative Party.
Kenneth Clark, you've been listening to some of those trends around the country. Conservatives doing very well in the South, but in the North, Labour clearly doing well in some places, though not well enough to apparently get the Conservative majority down to more than about 50 seats.
Well, I've only heard snatches of it, and the seats we've got in from the North East all seem to be from Labour strongholds. Obviously, I hope there's no marked difference across the country. I hope the things we're doing to try and bring new investment in the North East, the urban development corporations, the task forces in the inner cities, the better targeting of regional aid, and the attempt to revive an enterprise economy in the North that will help new businesses start up there and help the smaller businesses to expand there, will have their effect. It looks like they're going to have 4 or 5 years to take that further forward.
But you're the Minister for Employment. It must be clear to you that unemployment is having some effect in this election, a big effect in the North. There's been talk on this programme already of a divided Britain and a more politically divided Britain now. Would you agree with that?
No, I hope, firstly, I don't think we do have this starkly divided Britain. I don't agree with David Blunkett's rather Dickensian picture of life in the north and the contrast he draws in the south. I spent all yesterday campaigning in Lancashire, and one of the seats I went to, Pendle, I'm glad to see, my friend John Lee held, near Burnley. It's a very marginal area there, but we held it.
We leave there just to go for the result, for Dennis Healy's result in Leeds East.
For Dennis Winston Healy,
Labour.
20,932. For John Stuart Woodward Sheard,
Conservative.
11,406.
So the old bruiser is back in the House of Commons, longs to be Foreign Secretary. It doesn't look as if he's going to be Foreign Secretary on these results tonight. The man who even Neil Kinnock described as having been on a music hall tour of the North during this campaign. Very controversial campaign, particularly as was mentioned earlier in the programme during the last day or two when it seemed to go a bit over the top. Anyway, Dennis Healy is safely back. His majority was 6,000 last time. It's up to 9,000, just over 9,000 in this West Yorkshire seat. So let's see how it goes and what it tells us about Labour in the north, or in the northeast, I should say, West Yorkshire. Here's the change. Labour vote is up 5% there. The Conservatives down 3%, and the Liberals down 1%. Let's go back now to Kenneth Clark, who we interrupted for that result, who's with Julian Halloran still.
But what do you think about the future of a Conservative government with the kind of majority that you look like getting now?
Well, I'd be quite content with the majority of 52. I've been asked all day what I thought it would be, and actually I took a wild guess based on the polls, and I've been saying 50. I now regret I didn't have a bet on it. But I'd like to see it spread across the country. I'd like to see results from all those seats we won in the north last time, because really we made great advances. That's in a way where we increased our majority most spectacularly in 1983, and I think when we've seen those results, you'll find we've held a lot of places that we weren't even expected to hold last time, or win last time, when we first put our majority up.
What do you see as Mrs. Thatcher's future now? Do you think she is going to go on and on and on with a majority like this?
It looks pretty secure right now, I think. As far as I'm aware, if she does win a third successive term after 2 full terms in office, that's an all-time record back to 1832. The newspapers are already getting out those sort of Wisden-type records of longest serving Prime Minister and so on in the past. I think she's going to go on for the foreseeable future. And a good working majority enables her to get on tackling the problems that people are still complaining about in some parts of the country.
You've been talked about in the past as a future leader of the Tory party. Now, does this idea of Mrs. Thatcher going on, does that make things actually, the prospects for you becoming leader of the Tory party better, do you think?
I think I probably want about 20 people mentioned as a future leader of the Conservative Party in the last 5 years, some of them retiring in this Parliament, at the end of this Parliament, I think. I think all talk about future Prime Ministers remains totally academic for quite some time in the future. I've never seen Margaret Thatcher enjoying the job more than she has recently. She fought a very combative, very forceful election, and I don't think at the moment it's remotely worth talking about.
But some people said she did seem unsettled at times and not to be enjoying it perhaps as much as she might have done at times.
Well, she is human. I mean, if there's a politician that goes through an entire election without being unsettled, I'd be very surprised. I thought she performed amazingly well, and she was a dominant figure throughout the campaign.
Thank you very much,
Others thought very much more.
Now back to David Dimbleby in London.
Let's just have a look then at 1 or 2 interesting results that have come through. Behind me, the figures, you see Labour temporarily ahead on 21. We're not saying they're going to stay there. Let's just see 1 or 2 results that have come in, though, in the meantime. Dave Nellist, said to be a supporter of Militant, though Neil Kinnock all through said the NEC had looked at him and they agreed that he was not a supporter of Militant in the formal sense of the word, and therefore was a legitimate Labour candidate. His share of the vote in Coventry South East has gone up. His majority is up from 2,500 to 6,500. But in the Midlands, it's not always like that. Nuneaton, for instance, the Conservative vote went up. On the other hand, the Conservatives have failed to take their #1 target, which was in Carlisle. There's the Nuneaton result. Valerie Vaness, who said the workers would have to be armed if necessary to achieve Labour's aims, and for her pains, her vote went up 4%, but the Conservative vote went up 4% as well. And the Alliance dropped out of the picture, down 8% in Nuneaton. So the Conservative majority remains pretty much as it was last time round. All of this is fairly bad news for Labour. Let's just see how things stand, Peter. Can we have a look at the battleground
indeed.
again on the basis of this?
I can't resist just showing you this picture there, David, of Lewis and Harrison, Ben Becula and Barrow, all red. Look at the top left-hand side of the screen there, and you'll see the Western Isles red for the first time in 2 decades. There's the score so far, 38 results in. Let's see what our forecast is. In with the winning post, the 326 seats that any party needs for an overall majority, and what happens? Well, Mrs. Thatcher is through it with 362, we predict, on the results so far. 238 for Labour. Look at the seats colouring up. There's the Alliance, quite a substantial number of seats, rather big rural ones, most of them, going to the Alliance. Down on what they were last time, but still holding up pretty well in our forecast. 24 others altogether. Now, let's just see how that would look in the House of Commons and how Mrs. Thatcher's majority will shape up when we compare her with the opposition MPs. There's Mrs. Thatcher. There's the winning post. And whoops, yes, she's well through it, 362. Mr. Kinnock with 238. Add all the opposition together, subtract them from Mrs. Thatcher's MPs, and she's safely back there with a majority at the moment we're forecasting of 74.
Thanks very much, Peter. Well, let's just see. We've had 41 results in so far. Labour on 23, Conservatives on 17, the Alliance on 1. That's how things stand. There is the forecast that Peter Snow gave. 362 Conservative, down only 31. Labour 238, up 29. The Alliance on 26, just down 1. A Conservative majority of 74. And we are now saying firmly that Mrs. Thatcher is certain to win, as a result of this, an overall majority and a place in the history books. 3 times elected Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister this century to achieve that result. A remarkable figure and a remarkable change round in the figures that we were giving very, very early on when the first indications from the polls were coming in, which of course has been a big disappointment to Labour, who would no doubt heard our forecast, our forecast and others' forecasts earlier on, and now know that, as far as we're concerned, the game is up for Labour in this election. I think Vincent Hanna is down at his loo, and yes, he is. Vincent Hanna, have you had a chance to hear from the Labour leadership how they're taking all this?
Well, I talked to Neil Kinnock earlier today. He's at the home of his agent, Doreen Moore, where he's been for a couple of hours. He had a small party with his workers. I think that the attitude which the leadership has taken and his staff has taken throughout the day is that this election was like climbing out at the bottom of one of those Welsh valleys. They had intended to get as far up the hill as they could in such a way as to weaken Mrs. Thatcher's position. And they saw that as anything from a hung parliament to a majority of between 20 and 30. They would have regarded that as a great achievement. However, this sort of forecast we're talking about now is far removed from that. Curiously, last night in this same hall where the count is taking place behind me, there was an amazing, emotional family rally, all of Neil Kinnock's family on the stage, his supporters, his relatives and neighbours here. And they seemed almost insulated, the people who live in Islwyn, from the rest of the country. They can't believe that Mrs. Thatcher is being returned again. It's that kind of isolation from the rest of the country. And I think you'll find the same pattern. It's a point which he made to me earlier on about the different parts of the country in Labour strongholds, such a strong feeling of antagonism towards the government in other parts of the country, and equally strong antagonism towards Labour. One tiny point was last night some wag offered them the choice of perhaps getting Mrs. Thatcher out of number 10 Downing Street or Wales beating the All Blacks tomorrow morning. And you know, he hesitated and said that was a terrible choice for any Welshman to have to make.
Did he make it?
He didn't actually make it, which is a great relief to his supporters, because most of his supporters said, on balance down here, they prefer Wales to beat the All Blacks. But I think it's 1 down and 1 to play.
OK, Vincent, thanks very much. We'll be back with you later on. Let's go for a result from Hyndburn.
Votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Coombs, Keever Christopher, Labour, 19,386. Hargreaves, Joseph Kenneth, Conservative, 21,000. Order, please. 21,606. Smith Frank, the Green Party, 297. Strike John, SDP, Liberal Alliance, 7,423. And that the above-mentioned person has been duly elected.
So this is an extraordinary result in Lancashire, in Hyndburn, a very good result for the Conservatives. They had a majority of 21. It's gone up to over 2,000. And Kenneth Hargreaves holds this seat. Kiva Coombs, who was trying to take it, who was a solicitor, regarded as a left winger who represented Sharon Atkin and Derek Hatton and others in a militant tendency, has failed to get it. The Conservatives hold on to Hyndburn with an increased majority. So that's a surprise result, I think, from that seat in Hyndburn.
I'm very surprised by that result. As you said a moment ago, it was second on Labour's hit list of seats that they very much wanted to gain. I think they were very confident. This is an industrial constituency in the northwest of England, at the eastern part of Lancashire, and for the Conservative majority actually to go up substantially under these circumstances, I think is one of the most surprising things that's happened all night.
John Smith at Monklands East just about to make his victory speech, having won, or in the middle of it. Having won Monklands East, we've seen him a couple of times on this programme. Shadow Trade and Industry spokesman for Labour.
It will not be for the first time that this part of the world has showed the rest of Britain, and I believe we're witnessing in this election the beginning of the end of Thatcherism, and it can't come a moment too soon.
This was John Smith's result, his majority well up, 16,000 as opposed to 9,000 last time, increase of nearly 10%. The Conservative vote there in Monklands East, in Strathclyde, in Scotland, down 7%. The SNP up 4%. The Liberals down very nearly 7%. And John Smith, the lawyer on the right of the party, holds the seat safely. Remember, in Scotland we're expecting a very different picture, with the Conservative Party doing rather badly in Scotland tonight. We haven't yet had any Conservative holds or gains from Scotland, have we, so far? Peter.
David, here is the devastating news for Labour. Just look at this picture of our battleground now. Remember, all these seats in the old Parliament were blue, and all the ones declared are blue except one. Oxford East has gone to Labour, the 16th most vulnerable Conservative seat. This is Mrs Thatcher's front line. The most vulnerable Conservative seats in the country are up here. Hyndburn is the second most vulnerable Conservative seat in the country, or was. 21 the majority last time. The Conservatives have held it this time with a bigger majority. And so what has happened is that Labour have failed to take the second easiest seat of all. They've captured Oxford East, but it looks very much as if Hyndburn and Basildon are setting the trend. Look at this, all the way across here. Here's Mrs Thatcher holding Cheltenham, a prime alliance target, Nuneaton, Littleborough, Torbay. There is the winning post for the opposition. They needed to get as far as Cardiff Central, needed to colour all of these seats here red and gold for the opposition, and through Cardiff Central to win, to get away from Mrs Thatcher, her overall majority. But they don't look like doing that at all, because when we now predict, and here we go, watch for it, how the battleground will look at the end of the night, look at all that blue right the way across from the very top here. Amazingly, we are forecasting that the easiest seats for the Labour Party to gain, and indeed the Alliance too, are staying with the Conservatives. One or two going down to the Scottish National Party, but look, very, very few reds and golds on this battleground of ours now. Let's just push all the gains and the forecast gains up there in the top left-hand corner to see how far they get down the list, and they stop even before the first column is finished. 26 we're forecasting now. Gains for the opposition, including, incidentally, a Plaid Cymru gain at Ynys the island of Anglesey. There is the winning post, 68 there. Look how short the opposition are. Mrs Thatcher is comfortably home with an overall majority. And here is the story then of the last 8 years. We have now 3 maps to show you. Let's have a look at them. There we are, 1979. There is Mrs Thatcher's first victory. 44 was her majority then. 144 was her majority there. In 1983, the big landslide, the wave of Tory seats, Labour obliterated in the south. Come over here, 1987, the forecast we have now showing the Tories in control of the country still, with a very considerable majority, Labour beginning to pop back here, more out of the suburbs of the northwest, 1 or 2 seats, there's Oxford East, in the south, but still it's Mrs Thatcher's country. David.
And with the news of a Liberal gain, the first Liberal gain we've had tonight in Southport. We'll have those figures in just a moment. David Owen is on his way to his count at Plymouth Devonport at the moment, just turning up to hear his result. He expects to hang on there. He hoped to increase his majority. He told me a couple of days ago he thought he was going to go up 3 or 4%. We don't know about that. The Conservatives, we're predicting, are going to hold on to Putney. That's the Minister in charge of Broadcasting, David Mellor, for the Conservatives, is holding on to Putney. We're predicting that at any rate. And down at Labour headquarters at the moment is Adam Raphael. And I wonder what the mood is down there, Adam.
Here at Labour Party headquarters, there's a mood obviously of bitter disappointment. The champagne corks were out earlier on, but when the results started coming through and it showed it was going to be another Thatcher government, you could just almost hear the sort of fizz going out. I've got three loyal campaign workers here with me, and I'm just going to get their results. Andy, you've been working throughout this campaign. What do you think has gone wrong?
I think that the old north-south divide has been exacerbated, that we'll find that more and more people in the south have voted for the government that has looked after the wealthy and the privileged. I think this is very sad. I don't know what we could have done that we haven't done to prevent this.
Sally, you've, by all accounts, fought a very good campaign. Most of the press say you've had the best campaign that Labour has fought for many years. Why do you think it's such a disappointing result tonight?
I don't think it is a disappointing result. I still think that we're doing very well. We'll have to see later.
What do you feel about this result tonight? You've got a third Thatcher government. Labour seems to have picked up 30 or 40 seats on the night.
It's early days yet, Adam, and it's quite clear that key Tory seats are tumbling both to us and to the Alliance. And I think the excellent campaign is showing up, and Neil Kinnock's leadership in this campaign is showing up, and I still think we'll see some quite bad Tory results yet.
Do you think it's possible that the defence argument has cost you dear, and that's one of the reasons why Mrs Thatcher has won her third term?
Even to the last, the polling evidence showed that the electorate were interested in housing, in jobs, in education. That's what we fought it on, and that's what Neil Kinnock has done so well on in this election.
Andy, isn't it realistic?
Let's go to Plymouth Devonport now and get David Owen's declaration. Everybody's put up great signs. Armada 400 this time from Plymouth in 1988. They've learnt the lesson, the American lesson of getting publicity during the election results.
Devonport constituency.
Here we go.
I hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Ian Flintoff, 14,166. Tom Frank Ryan Jones, 14,569. David Anthony Llewellyn Owen, 21,039.
So David Owen's result, the leader of the SDP, is marginally down against what he thought in Plymouth Devonport. He's back safely, 4,900. His share of the vote has gone down a bit, the Conservatives up a bit, and Labour up a bit. Let's just hear David Owen.
Mayor, on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank the returning officer and his staff, and also the police, for all of them conducting the election in such a fair and delightful way. I'd also like to thank the other two candidates for the way in which the election has been conducted. It's been a fair and open campaign. I would like to thank my own supporters, particularly my agent, John Aarons, and all the supporters, Social Democrats and Liberals, for this splendid result. In 21 years of representing the city, this is the largest majority I've ever had. And it betokens a great deal of hard work, and I'm absolutely delighted. So I think it's better to leave comments on the general situation till afterwards. But thank you all very much indeed. And it's a great honour, once again, to represent this city of Plymouth.
So David Owen, the leader of the SDP, his share down a bit, his majority up a little bit in Plymouth Devonport, holds on there, obviously disappointed by the way that this election is going. Let's just see one or two other results that have come in. A liberal gain in Southport, taken from the Conservatives, 1,800 by Ronnie Fern. Oxford East is a Labour gain. That's one they really hope to get. At number 12 target from the Conservatives. Stephen Norris defeated. He had a majority of 1,200. Labour takes it equally with a majority of 1,200. It's the industrial part of Oxford to the east. It includes the Cowley plant at Rover. And another story altogether going on in London today. This is the first we've shown of the London results in Putney. David Mellor has held it, but the key point is the Conservative vote in Putney is up. Labour hold pretty even, the Alliance vote is down, and there are 2 or 3 other results to come in from London which show the same thing happening, the Conservative vote going up 4 or 5% in Greater London. So it may well be that what everybody talked about, the effect of the Labour left in some councils in London has led to people going back to the Conservatives, whether it's that or the campaign as a whole. But there's a definite move towards the Conservatives in the Greater London area. Now, Will Hutton, economics correspondent of Newsnight, is with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nigel Lawson, Mrs. Thatcher's economic specialist. And let's go up to his count at Blaby.
Do you see any pattern so far in the way the results are breaking, Mr. Lawson?
I think it's too early to see a pattern, but what is clear is that it's an extremely good night for the Conservatives and for the government. That is the way that result after result is coming. There are slight changes, but that's the broad picture, without any doubt at all.
Are you surprised at the way it's actually shaping up? Because this morning the feeling was that the majority, if there was going to be a majority, would be at the lower end of the range. Now it looks as though maybe 70-80.
Well, I don't think so. I think that we saw a very, very steady flow of figures in the opinion polls throughout the campaign. Conservative support was very, very steady, rock solid right throughout, and it looks as if the opinion polls, perhaps for once, were right, and that this has been carried through to the election result.
How do you yourself explain the result?
I think there are many, many factors. I think that the 2 things that are most important, the 2 issues that are most important are the issues of peace and prosperity. I think the fact that the people of this country trust our defence policy, they didn't trust Labour's defence policy, I don't think ever will, and the fact that they know that the economy is very strong. And that has been a fundamental issue. I've been all over the country, and everybody has been talking about that. We do have a very, very strong economy now, and people don't want to throw that away. Then again, there have been other issues, I think fears of what Labour would do on the trade union front and a number of others. But I think those have been key, underlying everything else.
Cecil Parkinson said earlier on this evening that perhaps one of the byproducts of the success of the Labour campaign was to harden up, paradoxically, the Conservative vote. Do you think that's right?
I don't know. I wouldn't say so. My impression is that the Conservative vote has been pretty hard right throughout the campaign.
Thank you very much indeed. Back to you, David.
Some interesting forecasts there. We're forecasting Gordon Wilson of the SNP, who I was talking to a moment ago, is going to be defeated in Dundee East, and we're forecasting the Conservatives to take Walthamstow, which is a seat that the Labour Party had. It needs another big swing. Eric Deakin there, another big swing for them to take that. So the London pattern changing, and the SNP doing badly in Scotland. Now, how do things stand? We've had 88 results. We're about to get the result from Norman Tebbett's constituency in Chingford. I think they're just lining up there. They're not quite ready for the count. Mr. Tebbett, you can see, standing there. Not quite sure why we're staying so far away from them, but anyway. We'll go back there as soon as we get the result from Chingford. And in the meantime, Dennis Healy joins us, I think, from Leeds.
Hello. Dennis Healy, a good result for you personally. Your vote was up 5%, the Tory vote was down. Is that what you expected?
Yes, I think so. It was a risky business because I've hardly spent any time in the constituency during the campaign because I've been campaigning in Labour marginals, but of course I spent a hell of a lot of time there in the other part of the 4 years.
What is your explanation for the failure nationally of the proposed expected majority of about 70 or 80 for Mrs. Thatcher?
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily the case at all. We're well ahead at the moment. If we took the ridiculous way in which you're calculating, on the basis of the number of seats we've won already, we'd have a majority of 250. It's far too early to say. The really striking thing so far has been everywhere a fall in the alliance vote, as it appeared it might be even a few days ago in my own seat as well, where they had one of the best-known Liberals, Maggie Clay, fighting against me. And this, I think, means that the mould which they hope to break is holding firm. And now I think Liberals who want, as David Steele told us a moment ago, to defeat Thatcherism will have to join the Labour Party.
Talking about the fortunes of the Labour Party, do you see a north-south divide? You're doing well in Scotland and perhaps in places like Sunderland?
I think it is so. I think the illusion of prosperity in the south has led many people to
vote Conservative, the reality of poverty and unemployment in the north has led more people to vote Labour, and it's interesting, as far as I could tell, that the Alliance vote...
Can I wrap you so we can go to Chingford and come back to you?
Yes. Norman Beresford,
Conservative,
27,110. Williams, John George,
Liberal,
9,155. And I hereby declare that Norman Beresford Tebbit is the duly elected for the said constituency.
And not only re-elected, but re-elected with a 7% increase in his vote in Chingford. Norman Tebbit, the architect of this campaign, has seen the Liberals and the Labour vote both go down, and he's picked up the votes. His majority up from 12,000 to nearly 18,000.
I, of course, am extremely pleased at this result, which does reflect for me in my 17th, now beginning my 18th year as the Member of Parliament, a substantially increased majority. But of course, my first thought is to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Mr. Knox, and all the staff from your town hall who have supervised this election. And again, of course, my thanks to the police, ever vigilant, who have ensured fair play and good order, which was not too difficult in this constituency throughout the election. And then I would also like to thank my election agent, Jim Costello, all my party workers, but above all, the voters who have returned me to represent the people of Chingford, all the people of Chingford, in another parliament. If I may say so to the other candidates, you all live to fight another day. I trust in another constituency too, but certainly to fight another day. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, that'll be all good news for Paul Channon there in Southend West, waiting for his result to come through. Paul Channon, whose grandfather, grandmother and father have all held Southend West, and there was some talk that the Alliance were after him there, and it looks now, on the basis of these results, as though he'll be safe in Southend West. We'll hear later on. Remarkable things are going on in London. We've had a Conservative gain of Battersea in London. We've got Walthamstow, which we think the Conservatives are going to take. So it looks as though the Tories are going to be picking up votes in Greater London tonight. Quite extraordinary results there. Walthamstow North East, also a surprise Conservative gain. But now let's, in the meantime, rejoin Wolverhampton North East, sorry. Let's rejoin Nick Woolley, who's with Dennis Healy. I think.
Mr. Healy, we caught you before you left. Just. Norman Tebbit there, with an increased majority, 12 to 18,000, and Tories doing well in London, Battersea. Is this the onward march of Thatcherism in the South?
I doubt if it's that. I think there are special factors in some of those London seats, and I think anybody would regard Norman Tebbit as a very special factor.
You were saying before that you, the projections were not things that you accept, but are you really refusing to concede defeat at this stage?
Of course I am, yes. No, I think, as I was saying earlier, what seems to be a pattern, insofar as you can trace one from this small number of seats so far, is that the Alliance is doing a good deal less well than seemed likely even a couple of days ago, that in the South, most of the votes they're losing are going to the Conservatives, in the North, they're going to us. Perhaps in Scotland to the SNP.
And Mr. Healy, I must wind you up again, I'm afraid, there, and hand back to the studio.
Thank you.
Winding Dennis Healy up is quite another matter. Peter, you've got some regional figures to give us.
Not only regional, but also we now are able to forecast what we think the share of the vote will be nationally on the basis of all the results we've had so far. And here's what we think the forecast share of the vote is after these results we've had in. The Conservatives on 43%, a whole 11% ahead of Labour in second place, really not unlike what those polls were showing at the end of the campaign. Quite extraordinary how our early forecast on the basis of the Gallup in the last couple of days has been proved really quite wrong. Of course, if this holds, this forecast, but there we are, the real results are telling us that the polls, the pre-result polls were right, and that is roughly the breakdown there. 11% lead for the Conservatives. That represents a change on the general election, then, of absolutely no change for the Tories. Labour up just 3%, the Alliance down just 3%. And what we're going to do now is just see how the Labour party's share has moved over the country as a whole. Up 8% in Scotland, up 5% in the north. Look how much better the Labour Party are doing in the north, and in Wales up 10%, in the Midlands up only 3%, and in the south up only 1%. And it's in the Midlands and the south that Labour needed to have the gains. So that's why Labour are losing this election. They're not making the gains where they should.
Peter, thanks very much. The extraordinary, the London story is going to turn out to be tonight on the looks of things at the moment. Battersea, the Conservatives taken, Alf Dubs is out, and what seems to be happening in London is that the alliance has been damaged. The alliance vote there is down 5%. The Conservative vote has gone up a whopping 8% in Battersea. And Alf Dubs, who's sat there for Labour ever since 1979, is out from Battersea. Quite remarkable and unexpected result there. We're saying also, on a quite other part of the country, that Roy Jenkins, who was one of the founders of the SDP, its first leader, is going to lose his seat in Glasgow Hill Head. And if it goes to Labour, it'll mean a clean sweep of Glasgow for Labour. Tony King, on the London point, let's just concentrate on that. How many seats do you think the Conservatives are going to pick up in London tonight?
I am absolutely amazed by the London results. There were a lot of target seats that Labour was hoping actually to gain in London. It appears that they're going to, in fact, lose some. I am really staggered by this. I can only infer that the vast increases in rates that one's had in some London boroughs and the phenomenon of the loony left has really done the kind of political work for the Conservatives that they hoped all along that it would.
They did incidentally hold Billericay, which is worth mentioning, where Harvey Proctor resigned because of the problems he had. A new candidate was put in. Her share of the vote, Theresa Gorman, just went up a tiny bit. John Cole, a brief point from you.
Yes, the London effect, I think, is very interesting because Peter made the point that the alliance vote has gone down, and what clearly has happened is that Norman Tibbett's warnings about letting in a Labour government have had more effect in the greater London area, and alliance people have gone back to the Conservatives.
Let's go and have a word in Plymouth Devonport with David Owen, who's with David Davis.
Dr. Owen, no alliance surge, and the results actually that you feared most, I think.
Well, I'd obviously preferred a better result, and the sad thing is that we are going to see another third term of the Conservative government. The lesson, I suppose, for all of us in opposition is neither Labour nor the Alliance has been able to dent the Conservatives, and I've always had that as my prime objective, and on that we have not succeeded.
Do you accept what John Cole said there, that in fact this time it's the Alliance that has been squeezed?
Well, we've obviously been in some seats squeezed. I think you'll still see us coming through in other seats. I'm delighted that we've won, for example, Southport, and I think you will find there will be some new, fresh seats won by the Alliance. I think a lot depends on what our position was before we went into the election. If we were second, a good second, it appears we're going to do well. Where we're third, we're not doing so well.
Your reaction to the likely loss of Roy Jenkins' seat in Hillhead?
Well, let's wait and hear first whether we have lost it.
What was wrong, though, with the Alliance campaign, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure that anything was wrong. I think the message that we put across... No, well, you must obviously learn lessons from campaigns, but it's not always. I mean, the main question is, what was right with the Conservative message? Why does that still manage to hold up? I think the answer is that we didn't come through strong enough to give people confidence to leave the Conservatives. And that's been the problem, that they have clung on. There must be many Conservative voters who haven't exactly liked what Conservative government has been doing, and yet fear or a variety of things has not allowed them to come and vote for us, nor indeed in sufficient numbers for the Labour Party. Neither of us have done well.
Are you personally now prepared to consider a merger with the Liberals?
Well, this is a matter for the members of the party to determine.
Are you personally?
I'm a Democrat. Our party is the most democratic party that's ever been in this country, and we have one member, one vote, ballot arrangements, and it will be discussed. I don't think myself you should hurry into decisions, immediate solutions. It may appear that that solves all your problems. It also creates many problems. So I don't think by any means that at this stage one should make any firm decision, except to say it's a perfectly legitimate debate which is bound to go on, and in our party it will be discussed at our Council for Social Democracy, and it will in all probability go to a vote of the members.
Has having two leaders actually harmed you? Have people been muddled?
Well, we are two parties, and there's no use us denying that. I personally think we have got to still convince this country of the virtues of coalition government, which is what will come with proportional representation. I mean, we don't know. It looks as if we'll have about a quarter of the electorate. We'll still be scandalously unrepresented in the House of Commons. So the old arguments about the distortion of the political system will still be there. But in terms of power, which is after all what politics is about, the Conservatives are in there. Mrs. Thatcher's still going to be in number 10 Downing Street, and we have not been able sufficiently to dent them. We've certainly dented the Conservatives in this seat, I may say, and they've had their vote cut right down.
But how long is it going to take to break the mould now?
Well, it's obviously not going to be done until the next general election.
So it's another 5 years, and
yes,
and so that will be almost 10 years since you formed the SDP.
Yes, it's some of these things take time, and a lot depends whether the left, there's a realignment of the left, what happens to the Labour Party. The Labour Party's had a very good press for this campaign, but in terms of actual results, it's a rather poor result. The country is still divided between north and south, between inner city and suburb. We have not done as well as I would have hoped. It's pointless to try and pretend anything else. But the reasons for it, we'll have to look deeper.
You're not tempted to step down?
No.
To say, to hell with it?
No, no, no. I'm a fighter, always have been. I've represented this city for 21 years. I've had razor-thin majorities normally. I'm sitting now on, for me, a massive majority, the biggest majority I've ever had. But as far as my own personal position is concerned, as long as the SDP wants me to lead it, I'll lead it.
Dr. Owen, thank you.
My promise this evening, the promise I...
The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Roy Hattersley at Birmingham Sparkbrook, which he's just taken, with the majority just slightly up on last time round.
And we will be looking after all the people of Sparkbrook, the Labour councillors and me, to the best of our ability. We'll do that because of the way in which the Labour Party relates to and lives with and is part of Sparkbrook. And my final words of thanks are to the Labour Party in Sparkbrook, who have secured my election into the next Parliament. Because of my duties as Deputy Leader, I've been out of the constituency a great deal this campaign. Oh, yes. My agent, Dick Knowles, will say that the spectacularly good result, the swing of, I think, 6% to Labour, is the result of him running the campaign rather than me. I say nothing about that this evening, except that I'm deeply grateful that Dick Knowles, in particular, acted as my agent, that we had a band of devoted workers who put in enormous amount of effort, few of whom I can mention individually, though I do want particularly to say that I'm grateful to Sir Stanley Yap for running the committee room with a rod of iron during the last 3 weeks. As to the results of the national campaign, we'll say something about that later on in the evening when the pattern emerges, but all I want to say and repeat this evening is my enormous pride that once more the Labour majority in Sparkbrook and Foxhall has increased, and my absolute determination to go on representing this constituency as I've now represented it for the last 23 years, doing my best for all the people of the constituency, irrespective of how they voted this evening. Thank you very much.
Well, Spark Hill, as Roy Hattersley has rechristened it, Sparkbrook, as it's actually called in Birmingham. Roy Hattersley holds on to it. There were some problems there about Asian voters who might not vote for Roy Hattersley. There's no change in his share of the vote. His majority goes up a little bit there in Birmingham Sparkbrook. And another interesting result, a Labour gain in Bridgend. This is a fascinating one in Migla Morgan. It's the second Labour gain I think we've had tonight from Wales. It's a Conservative majority overturned by Labour. It was 1,300 before. It's now gone to 4,380. And it's up 12%. The Labour vote in that constituency, and it's the Alliance, SDP, that's been damaged. Their vote is down 11%. So as Labour takes that. We're about to get Ynys-Môn, I think, in a moment. We are predicting that it's been taken by Plaid Cymru. That's the seat where Glynis Kinnock's brother is standing, and it was the seat the Conservatives had some problems at because Keith Best, who was the sitting MP, resigned in a scandal over applications for BT shares, and a new candidate had to be found in a hurry and put in there in Ynys-Môn, Isle of Anglesey, as we know it perhaps better, in England, and we think Plaid Cymru may have taken it. We'll go over there as soon as we get that result. I think they were about to give it, actually. But, Peter, do you want to have a go on the battlefield or the battleground?
Very quickly.
We think they're declaring in Welsh. Can you speak Welsh?
Oh, indeed. I can tell you what the longest... No, I can tell you the longest station name in the country.
We don't have time to do it, Peter.
Well, it will take you about 10 minutes. Now, this is the map, and look, these are the vulnerable Conservative seats in the old Parliament, and they're all staying blue with only 2 exceptions here and 1 exception up here.
We leave you, Peter, I'm afraid, to go to Ynys-Môn for the result. We'll come back in a moment.
Ieuan Wilson Evans, y ganrhaer
the Alliance candidate, 2,863. 2,863. Roger Kenneth Evans, Ymgeisydd Ceidwadol, the Conservative candidate, 4,010, 282.
14,282.
282. Ieuan Wyn Jones, Plaid Cymru, 19,580.
18,580.
$18,580. Colin Parry, Llafur, Labour, 7,255.
7,255.
So Plaid Cymru have taken the seat of Ynys Môn or Anglesey with a majority, a hefty majority of over 4,000 from a Conservative majority that was held last time of 1,600 or so from Keith Best. Great victory for them. You can see it all on their faces just before the returning officer gives the number, can't you? You can see who knows he's won by just a slight flicker of a smile and a slight look of pleasure and almost complacency as the figure is announced. Anyway, a Plaid Cymru takeover there in Anglesey. Let's just see them celebrating there. Outside, the Welsh national flag in the streets there, and as the news comes through, a huge crowd out there. Now, I don't expect anywhere outside Wales there'll be a crowd like that for a particular result tonight. Great enthusiasm about the campaign in Wales. Let's go back to Peter Snow, who inadvisedly began demonstrating his Welsh, which I hope he's not going to do again, with the battleground, Peter.
Ynys Môn, up here, the island of Anglesey, has declared for Plaid Cymru. It's a gain for Plaid Cymru. It's another bit of bad news for Labour, because Labour were hoping to take that seat as well. Colin Parry, Glenys Kinnock's brother, was the candidate there. The Labour Party reckoned they were doing well in Wales. They failed to take that, but they have taken the 21st most vulnerable seat, Bridgend in Wales. We now have 2 Welsh gains on our battleground. Remember, this is Mrs Thatcher's front line of defence. These are the easiest seats for the opposition to take over here. They've only taken 2. The Tories are holding on to some seats here. Way down here, they're holding on to all their seats, with the one exception of Southport. Sir Ian Percival's retired, the former Solicitor General, retired for the Conservatives in Southport. That may have given the Liberals the chance they wanted. Let's put the winning post in. There is the winning post for the opposition. It's not coming up for some reason. I wonder why not. Something has frozen the battleground, David, so I'm going to have to leave you there with the impression that what's happening is that the Conservatives are holding their seats right across the battleground. Let's just have a look at our forecast finally. 372 for Mrs Thatcher, Neil Kinnock on 231, the 2 Davids on 23, a forecast majority now for the Conservatives of 94.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. It's just after 1 o'clock. 4 minutes after 1 o'clock. Let's just see how things stand at this stage, in case you've been away and haven't seen it. We're saying Paul Channon's going to hold on to Southend. We're forecasting now firmly a Conservative majority. We're saying it's going to be 94. David Owen has said Mrs Thatcher's still going to be at number 10, and we haven't been able to dent her. After 180 results, 181 results, it changes all the time. Conservative 93 at the moment. They've gone ahead of Labour on 82, the Alliance on 5. And our forecast, 372 for the Conservatives, a net loss of only 21. Labour only 22 gains on the night, 231 in the new House of Commons. The Alliance down 4 now at 23. Other parties on 24, up 3, Plaid Cymru being one of them, just taken a seat there. The Conservative majority now, we're saying, will be 94. Mrs Thatcher is now edging towards an overall majority of 100. A majority of 94. A very, very good, safe, cracking majority. She had 144 in 1983. She had only 44 when she came in 1979. So it's over double the majority she was given by the country when she first took office in 1979, and it's going to be a record-breaking night. 3 victories running for a Prime Minister. We're about to get a result from Southend West, where Paul Channon is defending what he doesn't like being called his family seat, but where all his family have been for many years. Let's just get the result. Oh, no.
9,900.
It's Teddy Taylor. I'm sorry, it's Teddy Taylor in Southend East, not
Ross
Southend West.
Scully.
Let's just stick with Labour.
7,296. Edward Macmillan Taylor.
Conservative.
23,000.
So Teddy Taylor takes that seat. Humphrey Barclay for the SDP fails. We don't have the full figures yet. We'll give them to you as soon as we have them. And Tony King, you had a brief thing you've been longing to say for a long time. What is it?
Yes, I think it's very important. Our vote share forecast for the Labour Party is 32%. It's settling down on that. It's almost certainly accurate. If that turns out to be right, this is Labour's worst share of the vote, its lowest share of the vote on about 32%, apart from 1983, that disastrous year, since 1931, the year that lives in Labour's demonology as the year when Ramsay MacDonald deserted the Labour Party and Labour went down to such a crashing defeat. And it looks also as though Labour is going to have its smallest number of seats, again, apart from after the 1983 election, since 1935, half a century ago.
Well, on that note, let's go and join Robin Day, who has somebody who might have something to say about that with him.
Mr. John Prescott. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
What do you think's gone wrong?
What do you mean, what's gone wrong?
Why have you... Well, from your point of view, your rose is beginning to look a bit wilted, you know.
Oh, well, we've been on a heavy campaign all through this. I think you'll have to give us that, Robin. We've got excellent results here in Hull. We've got excellent results in the north. It does seem to be not too good in the south. And when I listen to, is it Mr. King or Professor King? Professor King. He's always knocking the Labour Party, isn't he? But when you look at what has happened to the years he's talking about, the alliance vote, it's the alliance that are getting crushed in this election, and what is happening is people now see that they're switching back to the Tory party and the Labour Party. And the greatest damage, if it is, particularly in the south of the Labour Party, has come from the fact of the alliance vote and the split of a third party.
But the alliance hasn't done very well. Their dream has gone up the spud. They haven't got their hung parliament. They haven't got many more seats.
No, that's right. Not that they've done well. I mean, they're doing badly, but in fact what they've done is to feed the idea that somehow there can be a balanced situation, and people have been persuaded to give them some of the votes, or feed the idea that the third party...
Excuse me, Mr. Prescott, I'll come back to you in a moment. I've got to go to David Dimbleby.
In the middle of eating a Mars bar. We just want to get the result from Sheffield Brightside. David Blunkett's result. Let's just go to Sheffield Brightside while I swallow it.
Provide us with this result. Could I thank the police, who have, I don't think, had any trouble from the law-abiding citizens of Sheffield, and could I thank the opponents in this election for the way in which they've conducted themselves. I hope they get a safer and less unacceptable seat in the future. I thought that my opponents, particularly Mary Glynn from the Conservative Party, was a masochist up to tonight. I think she may think that I'm the masochist from here on in. I hope that we, from this evening, in thanking my agent, Alan Wigfield, thanking Richard Palmer and Alan Taylor for the work that they've done, and all the workers, and particularly in thanking the voters of Sheffield Brightside, will build on the work that Joan Maynard has done over the last 13 years. I'd like to pay tribute to Joan as the MP for Sheffield Brightside, who's worked in Sheffield over the last 4 weeks with us, and say that we will be going forward to spread the message from Sheffield that the cause of democratic socialism, built over the last 100 years, is far from dead. We are in the business of building a society where the values and morality of justice and equality actually offer people the opportunity to participate and to take part in their own lives in a democracy, not reliant on wealth and privilege, not reliant on being able to make money out of money, or speculate on the stock exchange, or make money out of the sale of our public assets, but by hard work and graft, by using their skills, by the crafts that this city was built on. And we need to spread that message to those in the south who really treat the north of England and Scotland.
So this is the result David Blunkett, leader of Sheffield Council, takes this seat. It was held before by Joan Maynard, who he was talking about, a blind MP, one of the few blind MPs in the House of Commons. There's been 3 blind MPs before him. A remarkable achievement for David Blunkett, who will go far if and whenever Labour does form a government. Majority of 24,000, which is considerably up. He's up 11% there. The damage has been done once again to the alliance. The Liberal candidate was down nearly 10% in that constituency. Robin, we go back to you now.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to have a word. I've got John Prescott here, but if you just hold on for a moment, I want Alan Beath to have a word in, because he's been jumping up and down quite fairly, complaining that he hasn't been able to say something about the seat which the Liberals have won.
Yes, ages ago we won a seat in Southport, which is
just remind us of what that is and where it is.
Well, I think most people, certainly who have in the north been to a holiday resort, should know Southport,
and
which is
party conference is
indeed
there.
So, which was run by Ronnie Fern, and very great credit to him.
Yes.
But listening to what John Prescott said, I don't think he's perhaps had the opportunity to hear the figures coming in, which show that the alliance vote holds pretty steady, maybe losing 1% here and there over most of the country, except in those places where Labour sought to persuade alliance voters with partial success to switch to them in the hope of winning. And they didn't win many of those seats. And the dreamed of Labour gains rising from tactical votes coming from the alliance didn't happen either. So I really think he's missed what was going on for most of the evening.
Are you disappointed not to have won Bath, which Chris Patten has held?
Yes, although obviously Chris Patten is a very respected and successful Member of Parliament, and that it was on the cards that he would hold it. We would like to have won it very much indeed.
Let's just get away from this apology, fascinating though it is, the detail, because we get into danger of not seeing the wood from the trees. But the fact is that your dream of a hung Parliament and breaking the mould and all this has not come off, has it?
The 2 separate things haven't happened. One is that the hung Parliament hasn't arrived, but that could have happened even had we won very few seats, just by the arithmetic of what happens to the other parties. It's also true that we haven't had the great breakthrough that we would have liked. At the end of the day, we shall finish up, and I stick by my prediction, with significantly more seats than you keep predicting. You're now predicting that we get 23 seats, not you personally, but your bottoms in the back here. We will get more seats than that on a slightly lower vote than we got in the last election.
David Dibbleby.
Down in Southend West,
is to say,
there's Paul Shannon, who's dead safe in Southend West. His majority is up slightly from 8,000 to 8,400. So no danger to his seat there, whether he stays in the cabinet as the Secretary for Trade and Industry remains to be seen. Some people think that he may fall from the cabinet this time round, but that remains to be seen. But what is certain is that he's safely back in the seat that his family's held all those years with a majority of 8,400. The Liberals failed to make any inroads at all on his vote this time round. Now, we've had this result, perhaps we can just see this, which is Chris Patten, another very tightly fought competition in Bath. The Liberals, Malcolm Dean was challenging him, or the SDP rather, was challenging him there, but Chris Patten's held on. His vote way down from 5,300 majority to 1,400 majority, so it's become even tighter. But it's enough for this rising young minister to hang on there in Bath, 38th target for the Conservatives, and they haven't taken it. They thought they would. Now, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Roy Hattersley, is up there at his constituency with Mike Cockrell. Let's hear from him.
Mr. Hattersley, as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, do you now concede that Mrs. Thatcher has won an extraordinary and unprecedented hat-trick?
No, it's a very patchy picture at the moment. I think we've gained 5 seats, at least one of which, and I'm not going to tell you which one, I didn't expect to win. We've lost 2. And I think it's going to be very different all over the country. Clearly, we're going to do worse than we'd hoped in the south of England. We're doing better than I expected in the north of England, Scotland and Wales. I think there's been a huge swing to us in a seat in Wales, what's been reported. I don't think we'll know the outcome of this election until a lot more seats are in than we know the overall picture.
You and Mr. Kinnock are dubbed the dream ticket. Doesn't the dream look as if it's turning into a nightmare? Bad dream?
Don't lose the cliche altogether. The nightmare is the phrase you're stumbling for. It depends what the result is. I think Mr. Kinnock and me, principally Mr. Kinnock, ran our first-class campaign. We've re-established the Labour Party, whatever happens tonight, as a great national party. People who were talking, 6 years, about the death of the Labour Party and dancing on our grave, aren't talking about that anymore. The alliance has passed into political oblivion.
whatever happens tonight, the Labour Party is there and is the alternative government of this country.
I mean, you say you've run a wonderful campaign, everyone says this, but haven't you actually won the campaign but lost the election?
Well, that depends on the pattern of the results which are yet to come. As I say, if the pattern of the results reproduces the success that we've had in the north and in Scotland, then it could be very different from the one you're implying.
But what Mr. Tebbit says is that despite the slick presentation of the Labour campaign, you have a lousy product. Shouldn't you change the product and then you might have a chance of winning?
What Mr. Tebbit is saying is that the results in Greater London are going to be characteristic of all the country. What I'm saying is let's see if the results in Bradford and Scotland are characteristic of all the country.
Mr. Hattersley, thank you very much.
Well, we're back from there. Let's just see, we've had some extraordinary results in the meantime, while Roy Hattersley was talking there. Let's just see one or two of them. A Labour gain in Bradford North. This is Pat Wall, again an alleged militant supporter, and he was contested there by an independent Labour candidate. He didn't get it last time round. He's turned a Conservative majority of 1,600 into a Labour majority of 1,600 and taken it. And we go straight to Cambridge, though, now for a declaration there. Shirley Williams, President of the SDP, hoping to take it.
21,624. Shirley Vivian Teresa Britton Williams.
Alliance.
16,564. Margaret Elizabeth Wright.
Green Party.
597. And Robert Rhodes James has been elected as member for the Cambridge constituency.
So a great disappointment for Shirley Williams there, fighting this seat, having been defeated last time round at Crosby, and went to Cambridge, fought the Cambridge seat, and there's no shift in the SDP vote. A very fiercely fought campaign, but the result very much as it was at the last election. Shirley Williams bravely smiling with the yellow flowers replacing the yellow rosette, and the Conservative majority remains very much as it did last time round. The historian Robert Rhodes James takes that seat.
For this campaign.
Whether that means that Shirley Williams will fight on in another election, I don't know. It must be very disappointing for her not to be there. One of the original founders, the breakaway from the Labour Party, of which she was, of course, a minister, joined the Gang of Four in the SDP, set the SDP up, has been campaigning hard, chose this quite difficult seat of Cambridge, academic, the university and all that, to fight, and has failed to take it. Let's see some other results that have come in. It's another alliance failure we're recording here in Milton Keynes, where Bill Rogers, another of the Gang of Four, trying to get back, was defeated there, and William Benyon has taken it. Again, very little change in the vote in that seat in Buckingham. And a Labour gain in Halifax. Alice Mann takes it from the Conservatives. In West Yorkshire, this tiny shift, majority of 1,800, turned into a Labour majority of 1,200. And the last Labour seat outside London in the southeast of England falls with Thurrock, which was held by Labour last time round by 1,700. It goes to the Conservatives by a slim majority, 690. That's the end of Labour, for the moment at any rate tonight, in the home counties, unless they pick up somewhere unexpected as we go along. And one more, I think, from Leeds West, a Labour gain. We were predicting this. This is Michael Meadowcroft, Liberal, man who was against the joining up with the alliance with the SDP, very staunch Liberal councillor. His vote has gone down 5%, and Labour's vote has gone up 10% very nearly here, 4,600 turnover from a Liberal majority of 2,000. Let's go and get David Steele's result now, the leader of the Liberals in Tweedale, Ettrick and Lauderdale. David Steele has consistently increased his share of the vote. He's really made it into a very safe seat for the Liberals, and there's no doubt at all how it'll go.
Returning officer for the Tweedale, Ettrick and Lauderdale constituency, I hereby declare the total number of votes given for each candidate in this election was as follows. Constance Shirley Finlay Maxwell, Conservative, 8,657. Neil Glenn, Labour Party candidate, 3,320. Andrew Lumsden, Scottish National Party, 2,660. The Right Honourable David Martin Scott Steele, Liberal SDP Alliance candidate, 14,599. Majority, 5,942. I hereby declare that the Right Honourable David Martin Scott Steele has been duly elected to serve as a Member of Parliament for this constituency.
Well, a disappointment for David Steele, a kiss from Judy, and he's held the seat, of course, but his majority is down from 8,500 to 6,000. The Liberal vote has fallen there by nearly 10%, 8.5%. Labour and the SNP have been the gainers. Let's hear from Mr. Steele.
I'd like to thank the returning officer and his staff at the polling stations and the very efficient counters this evening for all their work in organising this election. To the police also, both locally and especially, if I may, to the team who've been with me throughout the length and breadth of Britain over these last 3 weeks. I would like, turning to the constituency, to give a special vote of thanks to the deputy candidate for the constituency, Judy, and to my agent Riddle, and to all those in the middle here and outside who've worked so hard to secure yet another resounding overall majority in the borders. My particular thanks, of course, are to my border constituents who have remained loyal and supportive through all these years. I'm deeply grateful to you all. This isn't a moment to talk about national events. I want to thank my 3 opponents here for a most courteous contest here in this constituency, and the message from here to the rest of the alliance outside is simply we consolidate.
Arriving at his count in Islwyn. Patricia Hewitt, his press secretary just there on the left, has been with him throughout the campaign, and the head of a photographer blocking our view as he struggles through a mass of people there to get to his count. But as Vincent Hanna was saying, he's a disappointed man, upset about the way that these figures have turned out, having some difficulty getting him through the crowd of the press into his count there. No chance to catch a word with him, I think, at the moment. I look at it. Glimpse of Glenys Kinnock going in. There we are, inside. Well, it's a disappointment for the two of them. I think tonight they go to hear their result later on, which will be, no doubt, a safe victory for Neil Kinnock, perhaps even an increase in his share of the vote. But the big disappointment is that we're now talking about a Conservative majority of 94. All smiles there, old friends to be greeted, greeting his rival candidate, Tory and Plaid Cymru there. Well, it's all brave faces and smiles for the moment, but let's leave there while we wait and go to Shirley Williams, who's at Cambridge, I think. Well, perhaps she isn't. We'll be hearing, no doubt, from Shirley Williams. Yes, she's there with us.
Sorry, if I can start again. If we can start again, Mrs. Williams, why do you think you lost?
You mean me personally? Oh, because we did better than the national trend, and there's a limit to how far you can actually improve the national trend. The national trends are depressing for both opposition parties.
Will you stand again, or is this the end of your political career?
I've said that I wouldn't dream of making a decision about that at this moment. It would be absurd.
But how do you feel?
I feel quite fine, actually.
Isn't this the kind of seat that the SDP should have won, a science park, a university town?
Yes, of course it is, but it's the sort of seat that I think one could say that the Alliance would win in a decent year, and the Labour Party would win many other seats in a decent year. This is obviously a year when, once again, the Conservatives are consolidated position. My own view is that the country will regret it very quickly.
You've failed to break the political mould tonight, haven't you? Why do you think that is?
I think I've given every reason already, actually. I can't think of any new ones.
But our projection of the Alliance, 23 seats, 4 down, where does that leave the Alliance and the SDP?
That leaves the Alliance for the long haul. I think we always thought it might be a long haul, and now we've got a long haul to make. What's again happened is that the Conservatives, I think largely on the basis of short-term financial benefit for the majority of the people, but I stress the word short-term, have won another election, and I have to say again that in my view, very quickly, I think within 18 months, we will see a very great shift in opinion.
Do you have any regrets about the campaign? Do you think it lacked bite, lacked focus, perhaps?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a good campaign, but I think the problem is that we didn't get much chance to discuss the issues. The television campaigns and the personality campaigns took over from the issues, but I'm bound to say that I think in Cambridge we did have a good discussion of the issues. I'm very pleased with the campaign.
But you surely have plenty of chance. You had full time on the airways.
But there is a limit to how far one can differ from the national trend.
Shirley Williams, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's just have a look at how things stand then. Coming up to 25 past 1, we've had 293 results in. We're approaching the halfway mark. Conservatives 155 now, well ahead of Labour at 130, the Alliance on 71, others on 1. And our forecast A majority for the Conservatives of 94, with 372 Conservatives in the new House of Commons, down only 21 on dissolution. Labour 231, up 22. The Alliance 23, down 4. Others 24, up 3. And let's see some results that have come in while we've been listening to Shirley Williams there. A Labour gain in Nottingham North. Labour gain from the Conservatives on 362. This was one of their major targets that they hoped to take back. They lost everything in Nottingham last time round, and they've done it. Majority of 1,600 as opposed to 362 for the Conservatives last time round. A surprise gain for the Conservatives in Walthamstow. This is Clem Attlee's old seat. He must be turning in his grave. A majority for Labour of 1,300 turned into a Conservative majority of 1,500. Wolverhampton North East, a Conservative gain from Labour. A very small Labour majority last time, just about 200, turned into a Conservative majority of just about 200, a tiny change there in the actual votes in Wolverhampton North East. In the West Midlands, significantly, a Conservative gain. Old Bexley and Sidcup, and an old and familiar face, Ted Heath, just 70, takes this seat again. His majority up from 12,700 to 16,000. A man who's had a very busy campaign. He's been on the stump everywhere. We've seen him marching around, talking about conservatism, enjoying himself very much. Campaigning hard. Majority of 16,000, his share of the vote just up a little bit. The Liberals down, Labour up in Old Bexley and Sidcup. And now, in a moment, we're going to have the result from Glasgow Hill Head. Will Roy Jenkins hold on there? He's seen Shirley Williams fail in Cambridge. Bill Rogers has failed to take his seat. Only David Owen of the original Gang of Four has been returned. Here's the result coming from Glasgow Hill Head, which Roy Jenkins took in the by-election and then held in 83.
Some people would like to hear the result. Here is the result for Glasgow Hill Head. Brian David Cooklin, Scottish Conservative and Unionist, 6,048. George Galloway, the Labour Party candidate, 17,958. Roy Harris Jenkins, SDP Liberal Alliance, 14,000. $14,707. Bill Kidd, Scottish National Party, 2,713. Alistair Whitelaw, Scottish Green Party candidate, 443.
So Roy Jenkins is defeated in Glasgow Hill Head. Founder of the SDP, distinguished Chancellor of the Exchequer in the Labour government and Home Secretary in the Labour government, now Chancellor of Oxford University. He's been defeated there. A big fall in the Conservative vote. The Labour vote goes up 9% in Glasgow Hill Head. It's not enough, the Conservative vote switching to the SDP to keep Roy Jenkins in. So Roy Jenkins retires, no doubt, at the end of this election to Oxford, where he was elected Chancellor in an election earlier this year. So he's won one and lost one. Must be very disappointed to lose Glasgow Hill Head. Ted Heath, at his count, which he's just had his announcement of a bigger return there, a bigger majority than he had last time, was watching that result, and he's with Hugh Scully.
Mr. Heath, can I ask you for your reaction to that result from Hill Head?
Well, naturally, I'm sorry that we lose Roy Jenkins from the House of Commons. He's a very distinguished parliamentarian. But many of us thought that it was inevitable.
It now looks as though Mrs. Thatcher will be returned with, on current prediction, something like 90 seats above all other parties, a majority of 90. And your reaction to that is?
It's a substantial majority. It's very similar to what we had in 1959. And, of course, a government can work very well on a majority of that size.
It's also been said that if Mrs. Thatcher was returned with that kind of majority, it would be the end of what's being called one-nation Toryism, the sort of Toryism of Ian MacLeod and Harold Macmillan, and indeed Edward Heath.
At Finchley, Mrs. Thatcher is about to hear her result. And we cut away from Ted Heath, who she defeated for the leadership of the Conservative Party, party which she's led to victory in 79 and 83 and again tonight.
Parliamentary election,
And
the 11th of June, 1987.
we get her result as she pours herself a glass of her favourite English fizzy water. I caught out of the corner of my eye, which she insists on having everywhere she goes. Here's the result.
For the constituency of Finchley was 69.71%. I, Malcolm Lester, returning officer for the constituency of Finchley, hereby declare that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Lord Buckethead, Graham Lloyds, 131. John Roderick Mervyn Davies, Labour, 12,690. David Howarth, Alliance, 5,580. Michaeli Jane St. Vincent, Gold, 59. Margaret Hilda Thatcher, Conservative, 21,600. And that the said Margaret Hilda Thatcher has been duly elected to serve as a Member of Parliament for the said constituency.
So the Prime Minister is back in Finchley and her share of the vote has gone up. Her majority 8,900 as opposed to 9,300 last time round. But it's over half the vote in Finchley has gone to Mrs. Thatcher. Let's hear what she has to say.
It is my privilege to propose...
Deputy Returning Officer trying to restore order and have people removed from the count.
It is my privilege to propose a vote to you and to all of your staff for the excellent preparations you have made, both for the count and for the conduct of the election throughout the borough. We're very grateful for the efficient way in which you have got the count through somewhat earlier than on the last occasion, and also grateful to those who spent the entire day in the polling booths. May I also say how much we appreciate the work of the police in guarding our security here and at all times. It is a great honour to be returned once again to represent the constituency of Finchley. Not for us, it isn't. It is a great honour for me that the citizens of Finchley have returned me once again to represent them. The only power we have in this country, in a democratic free country, is the power we draw from the ballot box. I am, of course, particularly glad to have obtained more than 50% of the votes, which is very satisfactory. May I also thank, above all, those who have supported me in my campaign for their tremendous enthusiasm, dedication and affection. Without you, it could not possibly have been done. I'm most grateful. Thank you.
Well, a domestic speech from Mrs. Thatcher to the voters of Finchley, or at least those who wish to listen to her, thanking them for the support. And this is a night of triumph for her, as she must now know, because we are predicting a Conservative majority of 94 in the new House of Commons for Mrs. Thatcher. A very good result indeed for her. At a quite different part of London, let's go and see the declaration for Bernie Grant, the first black MP to be elected to the House of Commons in the seat of Tottenham. And they counted this vote, they counted the votes in private and then came out here to make the announcement. So let's just hear the announcement they've made. Bernie Grant on the right there, the man who is trying to live down the remark that the police got a bloody good hiding at the Broadwater Farm riots, and may take some time living it down, though he had a letter of support from the local police when he stood as a candidate at this election. First black council leader in Britain, and it looks like being the first black MP elected to the new House of Commons.
I, Councillor Andreas Mikidis, Mayor of Haringey, being the returning officer for the Tottenham constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows: Dixon Claire Louise,
Workers' Revolutionary Party,
205. Etherington Stuart James,
Liberal Alliance,
8,983. Grant Bernard Alexander Montgomery,
Labour,
$21,000. $21,921. Murphy Peter Lawrence,
Conservative,
$17,700. $17,780. Nilon Peter Joseph,
Gateskill Labour,
638. Nichols Donald John,
Green Party,
744.
So, Bernie Grant has taken Tottenham, and he's the first black MP born in Guyana to go into this House of Commons. There have been 3 Indian MPs or Asian MPs previously, but he's the first black MP to go in. Russell Prophet in Lewisham East has failed to take it, but Paul Boateng has also got into the House of Commons for Brent South. And Keith Vaz, an Asian candidate, has taken Leicester East. Let's just hear Bernie Grant make his speech of acceptance in Tottenham. The Labour's share of the vote fell here by 8%. Conservatives went up 5%. There was some talk about whether there'd be an anti-black vote in some of these constituencies. It was reported by journalists who were following the campaigns that there were some former Labour voters who weren't going to vote for black candidates, and Bernie Grant's share of the vote is certainly down. On the other hand, Labour's down all over London. Let's hear Mr. Grant.
Comrades and friends, electors of Tottenham, tonight we have made history. We have shown the power of the ballot box, triumphing over the distortions of the media and the divisiveness of Thatcherism. The people of Tottenham have demonstrated that they refuse to pander to the politics of the gutter, and that they understand the real issues before the electorate in this election. I would like to thank you, Comrade Mayor, as returning officer, I'd like to thank Mr. Worsfold and all his staff for working so hard to ensure that today's election proceeded smoothly. I am also pleased to thank the Tottenham Police for their help. For my agent, Roger Harris, and for the hundreds of Labour Party members in Tottenham, the last weeks have been ones of continual activity. I am proud to have had such a team working to elect me as Tottenham's first black MP.
Now let's hear from Paul Boateng in Brent South, also just elected.
400 years to go to that place of our independence. But I say this, we went before as humble petitioners. Never again! Never again! We go now as tribunes, socialist tribunes of all the people, black and white in Brent South. Tribunes, socialist tribunes who are defenders of their rights, defenders of their health service, defenders of their education service, defenders of their jobs. And we go forward together. We go forward together. Sisters and brothers, I must say this, though. We can never be free. We can never be free in Britain. We can never be free in Brent until South Africa is free too. And I say this, Brent South today, Soweto tomorrow. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters.
So Paul Boateng, who was on the GLC committee, chairman of the GLC police committee, takes Brent South. The Labour majority has fallen from 10,500 to 8,000 in Brent South. And Leicester East, Peter Brunvels, who's the backbench Conservative MP, who was always in the newspapers, he's been defeated by Keith Vaz, who's of Goan origin. He's got a majority of 1,900, up from a Conservative majority of 933 before. It was Peter Brunvels, you remember, who used to say he was in favour of hanging and he wouldn't mind doing it himself, indeed would relish doing it himself. One man who's fought a very, very fierce campaign, and an independent one, and some people said one that was geared to taking over the leadership of the Conservative Party. His own motor car, his own aeroplane, his own telex machines, issuing his speeches as he went around, is Michael Heseltine in Henley. And he's there at the moment with Ian Smith. It'd be interesting to hear what he has to say about a Conservative majority of 94.
Mr. Heseltine, you've been around the country, you've visited, I believe, 109 constituencies in all. From that experience, are you surprised to hear that it now looks like a Conservative majority, something in the region of 90 plus?
No, the reaction on the streets was very much that, and when we...
He has to give way to his leader just for a moment.
Congratulations, first of all, Prime Minister, on your results. You said to me when you came in that you were cautiously optimistic. Are you a little less cautious, perhaps, now?
I've seen some of the results come in, and I'm very pleased with some of them. Naturally, we've lost one or two members that we shall miss very much in the House of Commons, but this is what happens at elections. You gain some and you lose some. But overall, the results appear to be coming in quite well.
Are you prepared to say yet that you'll be the next Prime Minister? Have you won yet?
I think it's always best to be certain that you'll get up to the absolute majority before you claim the victory.
But it's looking
If you're not claiming victory, Prime Minister, are you scenting victory?
I am very pleased with the way things are going, except I'm sad about losing some friends, and I hope and believe we shall win.
Prime Minister, what do you say about the results that would appear to indicate that the North-South divide would be even greater after this election?
We have lost one or two seats in the North, and we have held some seats where we have very, very good members serving very well in the North, and they have held and held very well. As I came in, we were losing one or two in Scotland, which is obviously very distressful because we think highly of Scotland and we do not like losing seats. Isn't it strange? People always say, what are we going to do about the North? We have tried to do a great deal. They never say, what is the Labour Party going to do about the South? I do regret that we have not got more seats in the North.
We shall work very hard.
Are you
at
fearful,
that.
perhaps, that your government after this election won't be truly representative of the north of England and of Scotland and perhaps of Wales?
We look as if we're holding very, very well in the northwest, and we hold certain seats in Yorkshire, like Keighley, for example. We seem to have held the Berries, where I went and was very pleased with the work there. We've held Hyndburn. So we're not by any means absent in the north. It is very patchy, and obviously we would like to hold more seats in the north, and we shall continue to work there, and we hope that our policies for the inner cities will help many people in those areas. That's what they're designed to
Do you have a
do.
message? May I ask you one more question, Prime Minister? Is it really good for a party or a government or a country to be in office 3 times running? Might it not actually be better for the country and better for the Conservative Party, perhaps to change?
No, I don't think it would. I think you want consistency in policies. I think you want clear leadership. We've given sound financial management under our policies. We've had growth, which has not only brought a higher standard of living, but a higher standard of social service, and we've got clear defence policies, and we have spread ownership more and more widely around the country. We then have new policies, particularly in education and housing, particularly for people who have not sufficiently profited from present policies, and I think it's very wise that we have the continuation of policies. You know, this isn't the first time we've had 3 consecutive Conservative governments. We got back in 1951, again in 1955, again in 1959. What is different this time is there's been 3 consecutive governments. If we get the 3rd term, and that's not yet certain, it will be 3 consecutive Conservative governments under the same Prime Minister, and that's the thing that's different.
Do you have the reason for my question was that in 1964, the Conservative government really ran out of ideas and manpower. It ran out of almost everything, didn't it? Is that a danger that might happen again?
We only just lost the 1964 election. I thought we'd by about 3. Very, 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 very narrowly. No, we're not in any danger of running out of ideas this time.
Do you have Prime Minister, your comment on Labour's recovery, because it would appear that the Alliance have not made a breakthrough, and how does that affect your stated aim of wanting to destroy socialism, the recovery of Labour that we've seen today?
Well, I don't think you have seen that much recovery. What you have seen is a shift of Alliance votes to Labour, a certain shift, but I really do not think you've seen very much recovery of Labour. You certainly have seen the return of some very, very left-wing Labour members, and it'll be a very interesting House of Commons.
Finally, Prime Minister, I'm told that you need 70 seats to win.
So the Prime Minister being cross-interviewed there, it was John Simpson for us. And 1 or 2 results that have come in which you may just have missed. The recount at Ayr, George Younger, that is, the Defence Secretary, defending his seat in Ayr. There's a recount. Clement Freud loses in Cambridge. The Liberals gain Fife North East. The SDP lose Portsmouth. The Conservatives gain Fulham. And Ian Wrigglesworth for the SDP is out at Stockton South. On that note, we go up to Glasgow and join Roy Jenkins, who's with Gavin Esler.
Mr. Jenkins, you lost tonight, very sad result for you. Why did the Alliance bandwagon simply fail to row here?
Well, we were operating against a very strong Labour bandwagon in the central belt of Scotland.
The Shirley Williams failed to win in Cambridge. Is the Gang of 4 finished? Is the Alliance finished?
No, certainly not. Let us, the last thing one says at this time in the morning, let us see what the overall results are. But an idea which carries the conviction and the commitment that the Alliance does is certainly not finished by one electoral setback.
But for how long? For how long can you keep banging away, breaking the mould, as you said, in 1982? How long can you continue where nothing seems to happen?
A great deal has happened. We achieved a great deal in 1983. We probably nearly held the position in 1987. But you do not give up an idea in which you believe because you have a setback.
But hasn't the story of tonight been a vindication for the two-party system? Labour doing extremely well here in Scotland, the Tories doing very well in the south, and the Alliance ground between them?
It's been an indication, rather than a vindication, of the enormous disadvantage of the two-party system, which tears Britain apart. And what I fear out of this election is that it's tearing Scotland and England apart.
What does the future hold for you when you fight again?
I don't think it's very likely I'll fight against the House of Commons. I've fought 15 15 elections, 12 general elections, three by-elections. I won 12 of them, which is not a bad record out of 15. And of course I would like to have won tonight, though I knew this was going to be an immensely difficult contest. But I have absolutely no complaints about winning 12 out of 15.
Mr. Jenkins, thank you very much. Now back to London.
We cut Michael Heseltine off in mid-sentence and substituted his leader. We'll try and find him again, and we'll get back to him later on. In the meantime, to David Steele, who's with James Robbins.
David Steele, Roy Jenkins defeated in Hill Head, Shirley Williams failing to be re-elected, Ian Wrigglesworth out, Clement Freud out. Not just a bad night for you, surely a disastrous night.
It's a very disappointing night. I wouldn't say it's disastrous. I've seen worse nights than this, but I don't pretend to it's anything other than a disappointment.
You appealed in this election to the thoughtful voter. Surely the voter says he doesn't think much of the alliance.
Well, I'm not sure that that's fair. We have fought a very thoughtful campaign. It isn't going to go away. The alliance is going to go on from strength to strength. And I believe that the biggest outcome of this election, which is that the Labour Party is gaining ground in the north of England and in Scotland, while the Tories entrench their hold in the south, is only going to pull this country further and further apart. And at some point, people will wake up to that undesirable fact.
But even here in your own seat, the safest of all alliance seats, you lost votes to Labour, yes. And yet in the election you called Labour an irrelevance.
Well, the tide is running very strongly for the Labour Party in Scotland. Even here, their vote went up by a third. There's no denying that that is the case. And I think there is the sheer frustration in Scotland and the north of England at the policies of the Conservative government. And it tends to go to the more extreme party.
6 years ago, you told your supporters, go home and prepare for government. That phrase must be haunting you tonight.
Yes, there isn't going to be any preparation for government tonight, but that is not going to daunt the supporters of the alliance. We're made of pretty stern stuff, and we press on.
But what's been the purpose of the last few years in the alliance? You say you've been building, but the party has not built any support. In fact, it's lost support in the country.
No, let's not exaggerate. We have built a degree of support which is certainly greater than any post-war election except last time, and that cannot be written off as a disaster. If you get more than a fifth of the country actually supporting you, that is not negligible, and I believe that even if that is not adequately reflected because of our electoral system in the House of Commons, those of us who are returned there have the responsibility to carry this fight on.
Do you want to go on leading the party?
Certainly for the moment. I'm not going to make any long-term decisions tonight, but there's no question of me throwing in the towel.
But you don't expect to lead the party at the next election?
Well, come on, the next election's a long way away. We've just finished another one. It's not for me to say anyway, it's for the party.
Thank you, David.
Well, we've just had the news while Labour talking. Conservatives have gained Ipswich. There is now no Labour seats in the southeast outside London, no Labour seats in East Anglia. There's the Conservative gain. Kenneth Weech, who was commonly known as Ipswich because he was thought to be so safe there in that one seat, hasn't taken it. Conservative vote, majority of 807 instead of a majority of 1,000 for Labour last time round. So that's another disappointment for Labour. David Owen has been talking to David Davis, who's been with him today. Let's just hear his reaction. This was after he'd had his result in Plymouth Devonport.
Could you give us your reaction to Roy Jenkins' defeat in Hill Head?
It's the worst news of the night, and I'm very, very sorry, and he will be a great loss to the SDP, to the Alliance, and to Parliament. And we've lost one of the great post-war parliamentarians. But it was very courageous of him and committed to fight Hill Head. He could easily have, after his great success in becoming Chancellor of Oxford University, he could have said, well, I won't bother to fight. But he was a doughty fighter, and I'm very, very sad to see him go.
I don't want to rub salt in the wounds, but hasn't tonight been a disaster for the Alliance?
I think disaster is too strong a word. It's not been good for us. We've held our own about, just about, at a difficult time. The honest answer is neither the Labour Party nor us have been able to dent the Conservatives, and here you are. The Conservatives are back with a very large majority.
What will your tactics be in the new Parliament?
Well, our tactic obviously must be to stay true to what we believe, to argue our case, and to hope and to believe, as I do, that the time will come when people will want to listen to our voice, and we will carry support. We've already got considerable support in the country. We will be grossly underrepresented in terms of the votes cast for us in the House of Commons, but keep fighting.
Dr. Owen, thank you very much.
And my apologies, it wasn't David Davis, it was James Cox who managed to doorstep or get hold of, doorstep a trade word, David Owen there and get that interview with him. In the meantime, Labour gain in Scotland, in Aberdeen South, but Labour failed to take Nottingham East. So Labour still doing well in Scotland tonight, not doing well in the Midlands where they hoped to. Robin Day.
With me is Mr. Right Honourable Edward Heath. Good morning, Ted.
Good morning, Robin. How are you?
I'm feeling very well. What do you think of the result?
Well, it's a very substantial majority for the Conservatives and for the Prime Minister. As she said, we've had 3 runs of government before, 51, 55, 6 and 59. And we've now got it again.
Do you think it's too large, a majority, if it's 100 seats or so, as is forecast?
I don't think so, no.
Do you think that the new Conservative government should do something about the obvious antagonism between various parts of the country, which has been referred to several times during these results, about Scotland and England and the southeast of England and so on?
Well, of course, we should always work for a united country. That's what one nation is all about.
What advice do you give the Prime Minister?
What?
What advice do you give?
Oh, I don't give Prime Ministers advice.
Well, you've never given them anything else, Ted. Come on.
I just say what I think ought to be done.
What do you think ought to be done?
Well, obviously, we've got to do much more to encourage industry in these parts, and we've got to make them realize that we are one nation.
Included 1 or 2 more of those one nation Tories, among whom I count yourself.
Well, don't bother about me, but I'm all in favour of one nation Tories, and particularly being in the cabinet.
But I am bothered about you.
Oh, no, it's quite unnecessary. I'm not really bothered about you. I've been watching you tonight.
You
seem to have shown a freedom in your discussions which has been lacking in your more orthodox occasions.
Would you accept a seat in Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet? Were you to she to offer you one?
Well, it's an academic question. I've always said if I'm ever asked to serve my country and I feel I can, I will.
Yes. Are you surprised that Labour hasn't done better because of Mr. Kinnock's apparently very good campaign?
I'm none the least surprised because it may have been good public relations stuff, but it was based on a number of false premises. And the real question is, if we want an effective opposition in the House of Commons, when is the Labour Party going to see sense? It has been extraordinarily incompetent, inefficient and ineffective, and so is the Alliance, for that matter, in the House of Commons. They've been disinterested. And when you have a Labour Party, on defence, what they've done is overthrow the views of all their leaders since 1945. And the public recognises this.
Why do you think the Alliance hasn't come through?
Well, because the Alliance isn't a party.
Prime Minister leaves her count at Finchley. Dennis Thatcher gets in the back of the car. And they set off from the count at Finchley to go back now to number 10 Downing Street, confident, even though the Prime Minister wouldn't say that she wanted to call it. They've got 262 seats so far. They need 326 for a majority. But we're saying they're going to be comfortably in with an overall majority of 94 at the end of this, 393 seats. So she drives with her police escort. A mixture of cheers and boos there as she leaves the count at Finchley. And as she turns away and goes down south through London, let's rejoin Robin Day. Robin.
Mr. Heath, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Mrs. Thatcher was getting into her car, and we thought we couldn't miss that moment as it was so unprecedented.
That's all right. I'm still sitting in my chair. I'm quite happy.
Yes, I know. I noticed that. Where were we? What were we talking about? Can you remember?
Well, I was saying how incompetent, inefficient and disinterested the Labour Party and the Alliance has been in the House of Commons in the past. And unless this changes, they won't prove to be a good opposition in the next Parliament. And as a result, they won't get support in the country. Everybody knows, you above everybody knows, that politics in the country emanates from the House of Commons. Always has done, always will do.
Can you think of any one reason why the Alliance has gone up the spout?
Well, I think the real reason is they're not a party, and the British have an inherent political instinct about these things. When they saw the 2 leaders going about all the time, arm in arm, television and platforms and so on, sometimes saying different things at the same time, they say, well, this show just isn't working. And it never will work like that. Either they become a party, or they disappear altogether. And I suspect that because of the problems of their leaders, they'll disappear altogether.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Nice to talk with you again. You're looking very fit.
I am, extremely well, and I'm delighted my majority has gone up by nearly 4,000.
Forgive me for not mentioning that.
Well, and I've also got 62% of the vote, had you realised that?
Anything else you want to say in praise of yourself?
Thank you. I'll see you again one day.
Goodbye now.
I'll see you again one day. Just a brief point, Professor King, because you've been studying the alliance carefully as well. Just tell me briefly what it was you were going to say. The news that Alan Watson, incidentally, for the Liberals hasn't taken Richmond will be a blow to the alliance. We're hoping to get that, but what was your point?
Almost everything that's happening tonight is a blow for the alliance. They're down Clement Freud, Ian Wrigglesworth, Michael Meadowcroft, Mike Hancock and Roy Jenkins. Bill Rogers and Shirley Williams have failed to get into the House of Commons. They have gained a couple of seats, but only a couple. Quite clearly the Conservative and Labour parties have succeeded in mobilising their voters, and the SDP Liberal alliance has suffered an absolutely classic third-party squeeze. The mould doesn't remain intact. It's cracked. It's certainly not broken. It has been a very poor night for the alliance indeed. They're down about 3% in terms of the vote share as well.
It's a very good night, on the other hand, for supporters of Bernie Grant in Tottenham. We're putting on an impromptu dancing display there on Bernie Grant's increased majority there in Tottenham. Well, let's leave Tottenham for the moment. We've had 468 results declared now. Let's just see how things stand. We're just coming to 2 o'clock, just after 2 o'clock. Peter.
David, here is a picture of Mrs. Thatcher's victory in a nutshell. Mrs. Thatcher called it patchy in the north, and patchy it is. Look at Scotland. Moray goes to the Scottish National Party. Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Labour. Fife North East, the Alliance. Cunningham, Labour. But then further down the country, come across here. Look at that great wash of blue seats. All of Mrs. Thatcher's front line here, almost even that is safe. Yes, Labour taking a few gains down here, taking a few more down here. Notice only really deep into Mrs. Thatcher's second line taking seats in the north, Newcastle Central, Manchester, Withington. Further across, as they get safer for the Tories, only a seat in Scotland, Aberdeen South going down to Labour, otherwise the Tories holding off. This is the seat to watch, Cardiff Central. What the opposition's task was to colour all these seats in Mrs. Thatcher's front line, the easiest ones to gain, and the second column, and down and through Cardiff Central, red and orange and yellow for the Scottish National Party, but they've quite clearly failed to do that, and we forecast, watch for it, that by the end of the night, this will be the colour of the seats in the battleground, and just look how blue they are. There is the measure of the failure of the Labour Party and the Alliance to catch Mrs. Thatcher. Let's just bunch all the seats up on the top there, which we forecast will go to the opposition, or have already gone to the opposition, and look at the 3 yellow bands for the Scottish National Party, and try and find, if you can, some alliance gains there. Only 2. Fife North East already declared, Southport declared, and here is the winning post the opposition wanted to get to, number 68. Look at how far...
For the alliance, John Cartwright held on in Woolwich, and his share of the vote went up a bit. His majority is down, but his share of the vote was up 1%. John Cartwright, the defence spokesman of the alliance for the SDP, in that seat in Woolwich, former Labour MP. He's been there since 1974. There he is, making his acceptance speech, defected to the SDP in 81, and has kept his seat safely in Woolwich, in what's called the Alliance Riviera. At least that's what the alliance people in that part of London call it, a string of seats. Now let's go back to Michael Heseltine, who we left, as I said, in mid-sentence, and very patiently he's stayed with Ian Smith there in Henley. We go back to Henley and join him.
Michael Heseltine, we were talking about the number of seats that, the number of constituencies that you visited in the course of the election, 109 in all. You're not surprised by the extent of the Conservative victory?
No. Whenever the question of the polls beginning to waver arose, the evidence on the streets was always consistently very supportive. And everywhere I went, one's Conservative colleagues believed that we were heading for the sort of victory which has now materialised.
One of the patterns which has quite clearly emerged is the success of the Tory party in the south, the absence of success in the north. Now, to what extent do you think that's due to the fact that you've won, as it were, the economic argument in the south, because they've benefited from Tory party policies, but you haven't won the social argument, the caring argument in the north, because they've failed to gain advantage from Tory policies?
Well, I don't think it is quite that way.